Oh, I love that you said that, right? Like my carefree days are gone because I have to take care of someone else before I can do anything, before I can have fun. I think, yeah, that is quite common because also this is also how trauma plays out, right? Like you saw your mother having to do that. Like she didn't get to be carefree. Like the truth is that women, even in marriage, don't get to be carefree. So even as a single mom, you probably didn't see your mother be just like a carefree Black girl, you know? You didn't get to see her just prioritize pleasure. And she probably didn't get to see her mother prioritize pleasure. It was always about survival. And so naturally, as you become an adult, that becomes your focus. So even when you're no longer in survival mode, but your thinking and your nervous system is hardwired for survival. So pleasure doesn't always feel natural, especially when there's a child involved, right? And there's also, let's not forget that like women are literally trained not to put themselves first. We're just trained that way. It's in subtle ways. It's in little ways. It's like, oh, well, I'm wife material because I can cook, because I can clean, because I can do this thing. It's always like you're wife material because of what you can do. Why is that? Men don't go around saying, I'm husband material because I can cook, I can clean, I can do this. So it's always about what we can do, which always puts us then in doing mode, right? So it literally makes pleasure and rest an alien thing for us from a very, very young age.
Hi, I'm your host, Justine Oxoy, and this is the Pleasurehood podcast, a podcast where we explore what it means to be a mother, a leader, an all-around badass from a place of pleasure, empowerment, and turn on. I am here to revolutionize how humans experience sex, pleasure, and motherhood by normalizing self-care, normalizing having desires, and normalizing mothers as sensual and sexual beings. Quick side note, you don't have to be a mother in order to listen to this podcast. Though I create my work with mothers in mind, this conversation is for everyone. I truly believe that pleasure is one of many paths of healing, and I'm here to highlight how to walk that path, no matter who you are. It is my deepest desire that wherever you find yourself on this amazing journey we call life, you can experience your power, your turn on, and of course, orgasmic pleasure. Hey y'all, welcome to episode 6 of the Pleasurehood podcast. You are in store for a really beautiful Pleasurehood podcast episode. I am so excited and so hyped to share this conversation with you. It was such a powerful conversation that when I listened to it a second time, I was just blown away by the wisdom that was shared. So yeah, let's just get into it. So in this episode, I had the honor of sitting down with a friend of mine, the amazing and brilliant Vangile Makwakwa. And Vangile is the author of 3 books, Heart, Mind, and Money, Using Emotional Intelligence for Financial Success, and the Holistic Wealth Manifesto Workbook, and the Next Level You Money and Womb Journal. She's a full-time entrepreneur and the founder of wealthymoney.com, a company that helps women of color heal ancestral money trauma so they can fall in love with their bank accounts, increase income, and live their best lives. Oof, I felt that. I don't know if you felt that, but I felt that. Vangile is also the host of 2 podcasts, the Money Magic Podcast and the Property Magicians Podcast. And she has been traveling for the past 15 years and has lived in over 12 different countries and has been building her company as she travels. I mean, come on. Vangile is amazing, right? Like, so amazing. So in this episode with Vangile, we go deep into the mother wound. Now, I am relatively new to the mother wound concept, but once I began reading about it, I couldn't stop. It's such a powerful theory that addresses the pain and suffering that patriarchy has caused in most women when it pertains to motherhood. Women have been conditioned to think of themselves as less than and not deserving or worthy. This feeling of less than has been internalized and passed down through countless generations of women. Women are often taught to prioritize relationships above all else. We are taught that accessing our power will prevent us from forming meaningful connections with others. And this belief can manifest into a psychic limitation on who we want to be and disconnecting us from our true self. And when we become disconnected from the core of who we are, it can create distrust of our own needs, feelings, desires, gut instincts, and perception of reality. The distortion often manifests itself into behaviors such as codependency and people-pleasing. And it just hit home for me the more that I learned and read about the motherhood wound. And Vangile and I go deep into all of this and so much more. Now, in our conversation, we speak specifically on the experience mostly of Black women, but I truly believe that these themes impact us all, no matter what our gender expression is. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I had facilitating it, recording it. I just can't wait for you to listen to it. So let's just get into it, right? Sit back and get cozy and prepare yourself for a really yummy conversation. All right, I am here with a very special guest, and I am super excited to just talk everything about money, because I consider her the money queen, the wealth consciousness queen. I am here with my friend Vangile. Welcome to the Pleasurehood podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is amazing. I'm so excited.
Yay! So Vangile and I met during a mastermind together, and we really got to know one another intimately. But I was just telling her, I actually don't think I'm aware of her story and how she came into teaching money magic and, abundance and wealth consciousness. And so I'm just going to start there. I'd love to hear more about how you came into this work.
Oh, yeah, because you met me in the good times of my life. That's the best way to describe it. You met me as I've been traveling, starting a property investing company, all these things. But it was not always like that. So how I came to this work is I actually have a finance degree and I also have an MBA. So my focus is obviously having studied finance in academic institutions in South Africa and in the US. So for me, when I graduated from the MBA program, I started having panic attacks around money. I graduated from this MBA program and I'd been traveling before, went to do an MBA with the idea that my life would be great because now I'd learn more about finance. And, I just have all the things that I've been taught and I would start earning the big bucks. And that didn't happen. I graduated from the MBA program and something really bizarre started to happen. Every time I would touch money or manage money, I would get panic attacks. So I would just struggling to withdraw money, struggling to pay for things. I was constantly in panic attack mode. And I say to people, you don't really understand how often you manage money in a day until it starts being an issue. Because most of us are just constantly paying, handing over our cards, like holding. This is how I also ended up with a lot of credit card bills, because handing over my credit card wasn't an issue. Handing over the debit card wasn't an issue, but like managing cash was an issue. So you don't realize how often you have to pay for things until you start having panic attacks every time you have to open up your wallet and you actually have to manage cash. So for me, it wasn't even that it was a big amount of money, anything, just because it was money was causing me to just have a full-on panic attack. So one day I was on my way to Bank of America. I was living in Haymarket in Boston. And I ended up just like not making it to the ATM because in my head, I was so busy strategizing how the hell I was going to withdraw this money. I still remember the amount. It was like 952 US dollars that I had to pay for something. So I was going to withdraw like $1,000 or like $1,200. I can't quite remember how much I was going to withdraw, but I had to pay a bill for $952 and I wanted to like do it cash and all this stuff. Oh my gosh, like it was so crazy. Like I couldn't get to the ATM because the idea of actually withdrawing the money kind of like had me crippled. So I just ended up sitting on the sidewalk and just working through my panic attack. This one was one of the largest for some reason, the one of like my most intense. It was like, how do I do this? And it took like an hour to get me to breathe normally, to get myself to stop shaking, just to be okay with the idea of managing money, of like having to touch the money. So I eventually decided I wasn't going to go to the ATM because it was causing too much stress on my nervous system. So don't worry about it. It was also why I could never pay my bills and all that. I was like $60,000 in debt. It was crazy. And at this time, round about this time, I was also earning something like $8,000 a month for 40 hours of work. But I never saw the money. I never felt the money. Yeah, like I worked 40 hours a month. I manifested, like how I usually just manifest random things in my life. So even as I was there, like I was manifesting throughout all this, but I didn't see it. I didn't know about manifestation. I'd never heard of any of this work, All I just remember having an experience on the sidewalk and being like, God, I need help. Like, I don't know what is happening, but I really, really need help. And I've been to therapy before in my teens, but I was like, I spent like 4 years in my teens doing therapy and being in therapy, but I've never heard people talk about money and what I'm going through. So I thought I was a freak, I was like, and worse, I can't let people know because I have this background in finance, right? So it's so embarrassing. I can't let people know that this is happening because nobody was talking about it. I'd go online, panic attacks with money. People were talking about, oh, I have panic attacks when I have to pay bills. I'm like, no, what I'm going through is like, I need to figure out how the heck do I sort this out. And actually, as you know, sometimes when we ask for help, things actually get worse. So my situation got worse. Like eventually I was so depressed, I couldn't get out of bed. So like things just like went haywire and just terrible. And I say this because I know some people are going through things and they're like, the more I'm asking for help, the worse it's getting. Because that's literally what happened with me. And I was just like, now I'm in bed. Now I'm struggling to wake up. Now I'm like fully depressed. Now I'm like suicidal. What the hell? And I kept reading these self-help books, keep asking for help. The universe is listening. And the more I asked for help, the worse it got. It was so wild. Like, it was just like a crazy 1.5 to 2 years after that incident. More like a year. Because that was in 2010 when that happened. But what I didn't know was by a year later, I would go to a Vipassana meditation center. And actually, I lie. I did ask for help. And then even before asking for that help, people had been telling me about Vipassana meditation. So people were coming and giving ideas. But I was like, what are you talking about? I'd always been interested in spirituality. I was the kind of person that was always trying new things. And I was meditating on my own. But I think people were like, 10 days, you take a vow of silence. I was like, whatever. So then I started on this path because, when things get bad, you're just like, it's getting worse. Now I'm ready for the solution that keeps popping up in my life. So, literally a year later, I think that I'd actually been told about Vipassana and meditation maybe 6 months before this incident. But I was like, no, there must be something else. So then I went to Vipassana and I learned, and when I was there, something really awesome happened, right? Awesome, looking back in retrospect, was I started to notice that every single minute of my life, I was thinking about money. There was no day when I was not thinking about money, no minute when I wasn't thinking about money. I was at Vipassana and all I thought about was money and worried about it and paying my bills. And my entire body kept reacting. By day 6, I threw up pure, I think really pure acid. I was just throwing up and it was just crazy. But by then, day 8, we would wake up at 4 a.m. to go meditate, 4:30 in the morning to go meditate. And something happened. I think around about 6 a.m. I realized something. I was like, nothing has shifted. I'm still at Vipassana, but I'm feeling a sense of peace like I have never felt in my life. So my finances are still a mess outside there, but what I'm feeling now is peace, just pure peace. And I always say that feeling has never really left me, even when things are in chaos. I don't know, there's always this just underlying sense of peace that it's not that everything will be fine, right? And I really am so grateful for this experience. It's even if nothing is fine and everything falls apart, it is okay. It is as it should be, which was insane because honestly, if you knew me before, you would know that is just not how I am naturally wired, So I needed things to be sorted this red hot minute. And I still get into that, right? Because that is my habit pattern. But then I left from there and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine and he was like, are you even sure that that depression was yours? What if it's not just yours and it's ancestral? Because you understand this because you come from a family of shamans. I was like, say what? And I always say to people, I grew up in a background where I practiced African spirituality, shamanism, everything. So it's not that I didn't know about meditation or didn't understand spirituality. It's just that I didn't understand how to use it in terms of building my business. And also because when you grow up in a family, often mother-daughter relationships, my mother and I didn't have the strongest relationship. So I rebelled against everything I'd been taught, everything that I'd known about African spirituality, about ancestors. I wanted nothing to do with it. When I was 18, my mom had been told by her friend who had a gift to get me tarot cards because I was going to start reading tarot cards and this is how my gift would work. I had gotten those, and then when I left and started traveling, I just left everything. I left the tarot cards, I left everything. I don't want anything to do with the world of spirituality also, right? So that's why I also didn't, when people were telling me things, anything to do with spirituality, I would just I wasn't hearing them. So yes, I was meditating, but I wasn't, 10 days of meditation, not hearing. When my friends were telling me about things like The Secret, I was like, what? And then they go into the energy aspects of things. I was like, nope, And I was shutting down my gifts. So I knew all my gifts, and my family had always been like, you need to utilize this. I grew up in a family where gifts are recognized, dreams are interpreted. My mom would literally wake in my teens, would say, what were your dreams? Tell me, what did you dream today, so that we can interpret it, and teaching us how to do all that. When I left home at 17, I left all that behind. But thank goodness, when I got back at Vipassana, what happened was all that got reactivated. I walked out of there and my dreams came back. My ancestors, like I remember having dreams where my ancestors were coming through and telling me things. Suddenly, because this one thing had helped me so much, I could tie the connection, because I knew from growing up in this background that there are medicines, plant medicines that you can take to activate your dreams, that there are certain spiritual practices that you can do to help activate your intuition, dreams, etc. All these things. I'd grown up around it, but I just was I had given all that up. So I just went back into my childhood when my friend had that conversation with me about where does the depression may not be yours. I was like, are you serious? And because I walked out of Vipassana, and since then, I'd struggled with suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, depression since I was 13. I walked out of Vipassana, and even now, 11 years later, I have never had a suicidal thought. I've never wanted to take my life. I haven't struggled even with depression. Like, I get sad in the way that most people get sad. And my sadness lasts for a few hours in a day. It completely revolutionized my life. And I intuitively knew that this was gone, that this part of my life was over. So then when my friend said that, I was like, this is crazy. Let me start looking into, why do we feel the things, the emotions that we feel? How do we come to be these people that we are? And I started looking at ancestral trauma, that's when my work on ancestral trauma started. But I did have I did have a slight advantage, because this is what I'd grown up in, right? I'd grown up in this environment. I knew about it. I knew how to connect with ancestors. I just went right back to my childhood and my teen years, all the things that I had spent my life rejecting and rebelling against, and started just remembering things that my mom would say. I started calling my mother, started calling people I knew, and just started asking questions and started doing research. And as I was doing this work, I also decided I was not to pay my $60,000 in debt. I was going to do inner work 8 hours a day and take the weekend off and make that my real work. So I was going to do yoga. I was going to meditate. I was going to focus on emotional and spiritual well-being for most of the day, and then work like get in front of a laptop, do work for maybe like 2 hours in a day. And fast forward, by the end of 2014, this was in mid-2011, April 2011, when I made this decision. By the end of 2014, I had paid off my $60,000 in debt, had saved up $50,000, had $50,000 in my bank account, had bought a property, and was back to traveling purely with cash, had no credit cards, nothing. And that's how I've continued. And this is how this work came to be.
My mind is just blown. I mean, I knew you were incredible, but it just puts so much more context into what you do and just how you show up and how you teach. And wow, that is so amazing. And it's interesting. A couple of things came up for me while I was listening to you. And one of them was in my last podcast interview we talked about ancestral healing and how motherhood is a pathway to being able to heal your ancestral patterns, and become more aware of them and basically heal them by doing something differently. And one thing that I know I have started to explore a little bit more is the mother wound, which I never thought, like, I had never heard of it until I had this conversation with my friend a few months ago. I never thought it was like a thing for me because I have like a really beautiful relationship with my mom. But there are times in our relationship where it's like I am mothering her and I am taking care of her. And the piece of like with your friend saying, like, was that depression even yours or was it like ancestral? And as I start to study more on like emotions and like shifting your paradigms through understanding your habits and your conditioning, I start putting all these pieces together, especially now that I'm a mother, and think about like, well, how has my relationship with my mom informed how I'm a mother? How has her relationship with her mother informed her on how to be a mother and all the way down the line? And then I think about like my conditioning, right? And like the conditioning around, and I really see this with Black women too, the conditioning around putting other people first and taking care of other people and putting ourselves on the back burner. And so I don't know, like I would love to hear because I just listened to your podcast about motherhood wound and self sabotage, which I will definitely link to in the show notes because you definitely have to go listen to it. But I just love to hear like some of your insights around motherhood, mothering, conditioning, and like and how that relates to self-care, to money, to abundance.
I love those questions so much. So this is how I unpack the mother wound, right? The mother wound isn't just like how trauma isn't like the big, horrible things that happen in life, right? The motherhood doesn't necessarily mean that we have a terrible relationship with our mothers. We can have an incredible relationship with our mothers and still carry some form of the mother wound. I also look at the mother wound from the aspect of the patriarchy, that sometimes the mother wound is that we are loyal to our mother's struggles because we see our mothers struggling within the patriarchy. And so we then decide to shoulder the burden with them. So it's this codependency or co-sharing of the struggle with our mothers. And then how it plays out in terms of expansion and money is that it feels like a betrayal to then expand beyond our mothers, because then it feels like we are abandoning them to the situation of the patriarchy. Because what does it mean? Doesn't it feel a little bit like showing off if I am making 10 times what my mother made and I do that in a day, make her income, her annual income in a day or a week, and she had to work so hard for it? Isn't that some kind of betrayal and almost like showing off to my mother and saying, hey, your struggle isn't as intense because look at me? So sometimes it can feel like we're betraying our mothers, and precisely because we're so close to our mothers, right? So that is a wound in itself. So understanding also, Casey, like how passionate I am about looking at how systems of oppression then also impact the way that we relationship with each other and how that then impacts ancestral and family dynamics. So this is just one aspect of it, and another way that we have the mother wound, right, is just like we don't have a great relationship with our mothers. It's just quite simple. It then starts to impact the way that we relationship in the world, because if we've been usually how the mother wound, the traditional aspects, apart from what I just spoke about, if you have a great relationship with your mom, when you have like a tense relationship, that's the best way to explain it, or even worse. My relationship with my mom included verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and physical abuse. I mean, to the point where I took my mother, where I had to call cops in my teens to protect myself. So my relationship was really, really intense. You know, there's a lot there that had to be healed and unpacked. But the mother wound can also be just like if you don't feel mothered by your mother, a child that was parentified. So one thing is you could not feel mothered by your mother, so you had to mother yourself, but you didn't have to look after your mom. But then there's the other element that you then are parentified at some point to look after your mother. Often you see this a lot in situations of oppression or class systems a lot, but also not even like even in upper classes or whatever, it's different. But a lot of times when mothers have to work a lot and work overtime, the child, and usually the eldest child, will take on the responsibility. And especially with single mothers, they'll become their mother's sidekick, be it the eldest son or the eldest daughter. They become almost like their mother's husband. They take care of the little kids. They do everything because you're more aware. You're your mother's firstborn. You're more aware of the challenges that your mother's going through. But in that case, you're literally having an abandonment wound and you're also being parentified. You're looking after your mother, and who looks after you? Who parents you? And often what you'll hear is parents, mothers that say, my little girl is so grown up. I never have to do much of anything. She does everything. Well, she does everything because you're not there. You're not filling the mother role. In the absence of that, she will then fill that role. Or when she sees you struggling with all these other tasks, she will then step in to help you out of love. And then that creates a pattern where you are parentified and looking after your mother. And how this holds us back. This is one of my favorite topics, by the way, the children being parentified. Because how that holds us back is you will find a lot of these women, and I'm going to talk directly about women, but it also applies to men, right? But you will see a lot of these women being overly perfectionist because they had to get things right so that their mother doesn't have to do most of the work. Even if their mother was grateful and didn't criticize them, it's that you don't want your mother to step in and have to do things because you're being a partner, right? Not a child. You are now a co-parent. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that it's hard for them to ask for help. So when you look at a lot of Black women, especially Black women that have grown up in a single mother household, asking for help is extremely difficult. Why? Because you are making the decisions, financial decisions, household decisions, a lot of decisions in conjunction with your mom. You are already an adult. So where did you learn to ask for help? Asking for help is also a muscle, right? Being able to be helpless once in a while is also important so that other people can support you. So what often happens is you'll find these women being the ones that take on the entire role for everybody. And it's hard. And also the difficulty in giving to self and spending money on yourself. This is huge, huge, huge. So many women come to me talking about this because it's a topic that I usually address, that you need to spend some money on yourself. One, it's changing the relationship that you have with money to one of having fun with money instead of always being in survival mode. It's starting to bring in the energy of fun and pleasure with money. But what most women will do, especially mothers, when I say that, and then I've learned now over time to start asking very pointed questions of my clients because mummies are really sneaky, right? Without even understanding it. What do they do when you say, go spend money on yourself? They spend it on their child. They take their child with on all the fun, everything. Go shopping. They'll buy one dress for themselves and buy for their child, right? And a lot of that is normal, I think, of moms in general. But now if you come from this background where you've been parentified, especially if you had younger siblings and you were looking after them, it's a norm for you. What you may even find is that, like, even as you get older, you continue looking after your siblings. And so you just get used to spending so much of your money on other people. Again, it's a training. It's something that you just sort of fell into and it kind of happened. And now to spend on yourself and to give to yourself and nurture yourself isn't so easy. It's really, really important to look into that. And then the other way that we are just, the mother wound shows up is just through abuse. When a child is abused, especially by the parents, and I want to say even more so by the mother, especially for women, because again, it's like someone who looks like you, your inner feminine is starting to take on those characteristics, right? So I'm not like even going to go in depth on the inner feminine aspect and how the mother wound starts to impact us. Let's just talk about self-love. There's that saying that circulates all over social media that when a child is abused, they don't think there's something wrong with the parent. They think that there's something wrong with them. So when our mothers are seriously abusive or ignoring us, so I don't want us to just be stuck on abuse being verbal, physical, or emotional, also just ignoring a child, not validating them, not praising them. That is a form of abuse. And when we don't get that from our mothers, or when we get the physical, verbal, and emotional, what comes out from there is something is wrong with me. I am not lovable. I need to be perfect. So one extreme, and I see this a lot in the personal development industry, is I need to continuously work on myself constantly before I can allow myself to receive. So I need to attain an impossible standard of perfection, or goodness, or divinity before I can then allow myself to have the breakthroughs and receive. So that's one element. And I have a body of work called the God wound. And then that also ties into the God wound. But also another element is the feeling that you are never good enough and always feeling like you have to prove yourself. And then how that shows up in terms of finances and self-care is that you need to earn rest. You need to earn the massages. You need to earn the chocolate cake. You need to earn all these things. So it's always about earning. And now translate that into money. It's like, I need to work hard to make this money. I need to prove myself. That's when we work on proving ourselves, proving mode, always needing to do to prove, because we don't feel like we are enough and we don't feel like we're doing enough. So then all this evidence, and even business failures and financial failures, become evidence of your not good enoughness. It reinforces that you are not enough. So self-compassion and self-forgiveness are really, really difficult in that case. So those are some of the aspects of the mother wound and how they impact our self-care and get us to sabotage and impact our finances in the long run.
Oh my gosh. There's so many things to unpack, but I think one of the things that really stood out for me, and especially because a lot of what I teach and what I share with others is pleasure, right? Like pleasure is so important to practice, to experience, because it creates space of an opportunity for you to practice self-love, self-care, nourishment, devotion, putting yourself first, all these things that I personally have found to be really important when I became a mother, because I realized that if I wasn't at a place where I was happy, it's kind of like, what am I giving to my child? Like, what kind of, space am I creating for my child to thrive? This belief around having to earn, having to earn the things that you really want. And I can even see that come up for me whenever I'm parenting my child, because I'm like, before I can sit down and rest, I need to clean up the toys. Like the toys need to be cleaned up before I can, do something for myself, I have to make sure that Arda is taken care of. And it shows up in small ways. It's not even like these big, huge ways. It's just these small ways that continue to pile up on each other to the point where, for example, I have a bunch of like research to do. And I was like, you know what? It'd be really nice to go to like a hotel pool and do a bunch of reading and just like luxuriate in the sun and have food served to me and like swim a little. And I just got so panicked inside of my body. Like there was this part of me that even though I'm all about pleasure and creating pleasurable moments for yourself, I felt so much guilt and shame for wanting to do that for myself. It literally took everything inside of me to like book the cabana at the hotel pool. And I was just like, wow, why is giving to myself such an ordeal? Like, why is it so difficult to do nice things for me? And as you were talking about the mother wound, a lot of it made so much sense. When my parents were going through their divorce, my dad wasn't really there because he lived elsewhere. And it was just me, my mom, and my brother. And a lot of times it was me cleaning the house, making sure dinner was made, making sure my brother was okay, me doing my homework and being parentified in like so many ways of just like taking care of the household. And,
Yes.
during the summer, it would just be like me and my brother hanging out. And I remember I would like collect coins around the house. And then I'd be like, all right, like, let's go walk to the gas station to go get like some snacks for the day. And looking back, I was like, oh yeah, that was just like kid stuff, and I was supposed to clean the house because it taught me like responsibility. And I was supposed to make sure or help out with dinner because that taught responsibility. But yeah, the more that I've studied and gone into the mother wound, it's like, oh, no, I wasn't really allowed to experience like the carefreeness of being a child. I never really got to experience that fully. And so it really creates, now that I'm a mother, it creates like this, I don't know, like this thing inside of me where I'm like, oh, my carefree days are gone because I have to take care of someone else before I can like fully enjoy my life.
Oh, I love that you said that, right? Like my carefree days are gone because I have to take care of someone else before I can have fun. I think, yeah, that is quite common because also this is also how trauma plays out, right? Like you saw your mother having to do that. Like she didn't get to be carefree. Women, even in marriage, don't get to be carefree. So even as a single mom, you probably didn't see your mother be just like a carefree Black girl, You didn't get to see her just prioritize pleasure. And she probably didn't get to see her mother prioritize pleasure. It was always about survival. And so naturally, as you become an adult, that becomes your focus. So even when you're no longer in survival mode, but your thinking and your nervous system is hardwired for survival. So pleasure doesn't always feel natural, especially when there's a child involved, right? And there's also, let's not forget that like women are literally trained not to put themselves first. We're just trained that way. It's in subtle ways, it's in little ways. It's like, oh, well, I'm wife material because I can cook, because I can clean, because I can do this thing. It's always like you're wife material because of what you can do. Why is that? Men don't go around saying, I'm husband material because I can cook, I can clean, I can do this. So it's always about what we can do, which always puts us then in doing mode, right? So it literally makes pleasure and rest an alien thing for us from a very, very young age.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes, I completely agree. I mean, that's kind of like how I grew up. It was very much like, well, it's interesting because my mom was always like, she would tell me, like, you put yourself first, you go to school, you study, you become the person that you want to be before you settle down, before you have kids. Like, you have plenty of time for that. She did tell me that message all of the time. But then there was like another subtle message, not so much from her, but more of just like growing up in a very like Christian setting where it's like, you find your husband, you get married, you have children, and like that's your life. That is your existence. And so I always felt like I had these two parts of myself competing for the attention where it's like, yeah, I went to school, I moved to New York, I was really into like working hard, trying to figure out my career. But then secretly, there was this other part of me that was like, Casey, you have to find a husband before all the good men are gone, and you have to make, like that whole messaging of like, there's only so many men.
In your 30s, you're not going to ever find a good man. They all taken up in college. In your 20s. Oh, in your 40s, there is nothing to choose from in the pool, right? Most of them are divorced. They have kids. They have ex-wives to deal with. Oh, it's insane. This is madness. However, men always somehow know that they always have a good pool of women to choose from. So how does that work?
Right. And when I look back into my childhood and in like my teenage years, the conditioning, it was just so insane because like for the girls, it was always like, be pure, don't have sex before you're married. It's your responsibility to kind of like fend off the boys. And then for the boys, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, you can like, oh, boys will be boys. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even remember the boys that I grew up with getting lectures about being good husbands or, like saving themselves for marriage, like nothing
I
like
don't
that.
remember either. I mean, I don't come from a Christian background, but it just in general in society, all this messaging was floating around. But the other thing that I want to go back to is, Casey, like hearing your mother say what she said, and then like the messaging that you then got. Because my mom, even though she was abusive, all those things, would also say those things, right? But I also think one of the things that I started to understand in my work is that it's not about what a parent is saying, what they're encouraging, it's about what they are modeling. Because this is what children are taking on. It's about what they are modeling and how their nervous system is feeling as they are modeling that. So if your mom is excited, or as a mother, you are excited about going for massages and it's really coming through in your nervous system, or your nervous system is fully regulated, or there's a sense of joy, that's what your children are picking up. But if you're going for a massage and you're modeling that, but at the core of it, there's fear, there's anxiety, your children are co-regulating to that. So they're starting to associate the fear and anxiety with going off to go get the self-pleasure and all that other stuff. So it's so powerful because children are becoming loyal to our behaviors, right? So this is where also the vow of loyalty becomes activated, is that even if our mothers say that, it will be uncomfortable for us to splurge, to do all the things that we want to do, even if we're making the money, because we're always going to be feeling like our mothers can't afford. So how I tried to circumvent that guilt when I made my first 6 figures in my business was I then try to gift my mom all the things. I renovated her house, turned it into a retreat center. Then I gifted her a trip to Thailand. She had 2 weeks in Thailand at a retreat center and got 5-hour massages every day. Then we went to Sri Lanka and she did 5-star hotels. I went overboard. And part of that was I was overgiving to my mother and doing all these things. And I remember in Thailand, one visa, the lady that owns the massage place pulled me aside at the retreat center and she said, "You've just left your mom here for 2 weeks. You've never spent 2 weeks at this retreat center. What's happening? You've not," and actually she would not let my mom get the final massage. She insisted that I come for the final day and do the full 5 hours and sleep over and do everything. She was like, "We're not doing this. You're coming to experience the thing that you've gifted that you haven't gifted to yourself." That was actually one of the most revolutionary things that someone has done for me, because she absolutely insisted. And then my mom was like, "Oh, actually, I didn't know she didn't even gift this to herself. This is so strange. Okay, I get what you're saying, One Visa. Let her have it." But this for me was also, please validate me. Mom, it was also a sense of, look at how far I've come. I'm proving myself. I didn't end up useless and good for nothing like you told me I would. But there was also an element like, I am so sorry that you gave up your life for us and you didn't get to experience these things. So now I am going to repay that with interest, I'm going to repay that. And there was also just this element of, if my mother can have these things, then it will be okay for me. So I was forcing her to receive some of these things. And some of them she couldn't even hold in her nervous system, right? She would end up arguing with me, all the stuff. And that's because I felt like if she can have it, then finally it would give me permission to be able to gift myself retreats and do 5-hour massages. It would finally give me permission to go stay at the 5-star hotels. It would finally give me permission to renovate my property. And the irony is, after those things, I did do those things for myself after I did that for my mother. But it is so crazy. And it's only after having that conversation with One Visa that I was like, this is so crazy. I thought I'd worked through my mother wound, like I've been doing the work around it, but I didn't realize how it was showing up in even my relationship with money and the things that I wanted to do for myself. So I had to do work on that and give myself permission to receive from myself at that level, even if my mother had not received, because I would feel so guilty because my mother has not received. My mother hasn't experienced this. So how can I experience it, right? And so it can be very, very intense. So I always say to people, if you want to free the next generation, honestly and truly, work on regulating your nervous system and your receiving set points, and have your children, especially as mothers, especially your daughters, have them see you enjoy your life. Have them see you thrive. Have them see you in pleasure so that they can know for themselves that that's okay. They don't have to feel guilt. They don't have to deal with a dysregulated nervous system because you didn't have that, and they feel that it's wrong for them to have it because you didn't have it. This is literally how we start to change the next generation. It's one of the pivotal ways that we start to change things for the next generation, especially for women, because the world will always tell men that they deserve, right? They will always be told that it's okay as a father to go out and do things because the mother is home. But nobody's going to tell us those things. So we need to start normalizing that. And one way to normalize it is to normalize giving to ourselves, normalize receiving and holding what we receive. I seriously, the first time I made 6 figures in my business, a lot of that money went towards my mother. No jokes. Because I didn't know how to receive it. But for me, there were also many, many layers, right? I was trying to prove myself. I was trying to prove that I was good enough. All these other things. So it was crazy.
Oh my gosh, yes, to free the next generation. I love that so much. And that is such a beautiful place to kind of complete our conversation, because I feel that what you said was just so potent. I want people to walk away with that huge nugget of beautiful, beautiful wisdom. So, Vangile, I could just continue to have this conversation and speak with you, but I am so just grateful and honored that you took this time to spend with me and to just share your wisdom and knowledge.
Thank you so much. This was so beautiful. I'm so excited that I could share and talk about this. So, so powerful. Thank you.
Thank you again so much for joining another episode of the Pleasurehood podcast. I mean, did you not enjoy that conversation? I don't care where you are. I want to hear a yes, 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 yes. Such a brilliant conversation with the beautiful Vangile. You can learn more about Vangile and her work at wealthymoney.com. That's wealthy, and then there's a dash in between wealthy and money.com. You can find a link in the show notes below. You can also access a free training, which is a 7-day tap into your ancestral money wisdom training. And again, you can find a link to this training in the show notes. I signed up for it right after our conversation. I'm on day 1 and it is already blowing my mind. So go sign up for this free training, for this wisdom. You're not going to be upset about it. Believe me. Be sure to tune in next week with another special guest, Tamsin Crimmins. Now, Tamsin is my business coach, so I just love and adore her. But we have a really powerful conversation on how we get to change the script to have more powerful experiences of wealth, health, and motherhood. And we also discuss how we get to define motherhood and parenthood for ourselves and begin to create and shape that reality one step at a time. I look forward to sharing this potent and powerful conversation with you next week. If you are new to the Pleasurehood podcast, first of all, welcome. And if you liked what you heard and you want to connect with me more, I encourage you to go back to some of our past episodes. You can also follow me on Instagram at Justine Oxoy, and also drop into my YouTube channel, which is aptly named Wild Sexy Free. And if you're an Apple Podcast user, you can support the podcast by leaving a review there. I would really, truly appreciate it. All right, beauties, that's all I have for you today. I am sending you so much love, pleasure, and sexy vibes your way. Until next time, stay wild, sexy, and free.